The crystal spires of Helios Prime caught the morning light and turned it into music. Each tower sang a different note as the wind passed through their carved surfaces. Together they made a harmony that could be heard across the entire planet. For 300 years, this same music had been broadcast into space, carrying a simple message. We are here. We're peaceful. We seek friends among the stars. Resonance Keeper Thanel stood at the top of the highest spire, his crystalline body reflecting the golden sunlight in 1,000 different directions. His form was tall and elegant, made of living crystal that sparkled like diamonds. He was old, even by Calorian standards, and had spent most of his long life listening to the silence that came back from space. The Calorians had tried everything to make contact with other species. They sent mathematical equations that showed their intelligence. They broadcast their most beautiful songs. They even tried simple counting patterns that any intelligent race should understand. But space remained quiet. No one answered their calls. Still nothing today? Asked melodic tender Ziffel, climbing up to join Thenel on the observation platform. Ziffel was young for a Calorian, only 200 years old, and her crystal body still held the bright colors of youth. Nothing, Thenel replied, his voice creating soft chimes in the air around them. But we must not lose hope. Somewhere out there, others like us must exist. They simply have not heard our songs yet. Below them, the city of Harmony stretched out in all directions. It was a place of impossible beauty, where buildings grew from the ground like crystal trees and streets curved in perfect mathematical spirals. 12 billion Calorians lived on their world, all of them peaceful. All of them hoping that someday they would find friends among the stars. The Calorians had never known war. They had no weapons, no armies, no concept of violence. Their entire culture was built around harmony and cooperation. Even their technology was based on working together with their planet rather than conquering it. They had achieved spaceflight, but only to place communication satellites in orbit. They had never felt the need to leave their beautiful world. Thenel activated the great transmitter one more time. Signal would travel for years through the empty darkness, carrying their message of friendship to anyone who might be listening. He had done this same thing every day for decades, never giving up hope that someone would answer. Far away, in a different part of the galaxy, Captain Jake Morrison was having a very different kind of morning. The bridge of the UES horizon was buzzing with activity as his crew worked through their daily routines. The Horizon was an exploration ship, built to travel to distant stars and search for new worlds. It was not the biggest ship in Earth's fleet, but it was fast and well-equipped for long journeys. Anything interesting on the sensors today, Lisa? Morrison asked his chief science officer. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez looked up from her console, pushing a strand of dark hair out of her eyes. Actually, yes. I've been tracking some unusual radio signals from the Andromeda sector. They're very faint, but they seem to have a pattern. Morrison walked over to look at her screen. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes, the sort. A person who had joined the space service because he loved discovering new things. What kind of pattern? Mathematical sequences, but they're embedded in what sounds like music. It's beautiful, actually. Here, listen to this. Rodriguez played the signal through the bridge speakers. The crew stopped their work to listen. The sound was unlike anything they had ever heard. It was hauntingly beautiful, like whale songs mixed with classical music, but there was something clearly artificial about it. Something designed. That's definitely not natural, said Chief Engineer Tony Walsh, leaning back in his chair. Walsh was a practical man who understood machines better than people, but even he could appreciate the elegance of the signal.
How
far away is it coming from? Morrison asked. About 47 light years. The signal is old, probably been traveling for decades, but it's still being transmitted. Whoever is sending it is still out there. Morrison felt a familiar excitement building in his chest. This was why he had become an explorer. Can you determine anything else about the source? Rodriguez worked at her console for several minutes, running the signal through various analysis programs. The transmission is coming from a single planet. Orbiting a G-type star, the planet seems to be in the habitable zone. Captain, the signal is clearly artificial. Someone is deliberately trying to communicate. The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. After decades of searching, humanity had finally found proof that they were not alone in the universe. Someone else was out there, and they were trying to make contact. "Plot a course for the source of the signal," Morrison ordered. "Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we're going to investigate." Communications Officer Rick Santos looked up from his station. "Sir, we're pretty far from Earth. It will take months to get there, and we don't know what we'll find." Morrison nodded. "I know, but someone is calling out there, and we're going to answer. It's what we do." The crew of the Horizon began preparations. For the long journey, Dr. Amy Chen, their linguist, started working on ways to decode the alien signal. Ben Parker, their cultural specialist, began researching first contact protocols. Medical Officer Karen Phillips made sure they had everything they needed for an extended mission. But as the Horizon changed course toward the source of the signal, they were not the only ones who had heard the Calorian transmissions. In a darker part of space, aboard a massive warship called the Bone Render, War Master Corvin was studying the same signals with very different intentions. Corvin was a Vex, one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, with 6 powerful arms and thick armor plating covering his entire body. His species had conquered dozens of worlds through brutal warfare, and they were always looking for new targets. "These signals show weakness," Corvin growled to his second-in-command. "Any species that broadcasts their location so openly must have no defenses. They will make easy slaves." Subcommander Threx nodded agreement. The Vex had built their empire by crushing peaceful species and taking their resources. The Calorian signals were like a dinner bell to them. "Prepare the fleet," Corvin ordered. "We leave immediately. Its conquest should be quick and profitable." Back on Kelios Prime, Thynel continued his daily vigil at the Great Transmitter. He had no way of knowing that his peaceful messages had been heard by 2 very different species. One was coming as friends, hoping to learn and share knowledge. The other was coming as conquerors, planning to destroy everything the Calorians had built, as the twin suns of Kelios Prime set behind the Crystal Mountains. Thynel allowed himself to hope that tomorrow might bring the answer he had waited for. His entire life, somewhere in the darkness between the stars, 2 ships were racing toward his world. One carried explorers who had been moved by the beauty of Calorian music. The other carried warriors who saw that same music as a sign of weakness. To be exploited, the Calorians had waited 3 centuries for friends to answer their call. They were about to discover that the universe doesn't always send what you ask for. Sometimes it sends what you need instead. Sometimes what you need is someone willing to fight for you, even if you don't understand why fighting is necessary. The Great Transmitter continued its endless broadcast, sending songs of peace into the void, unaware that those songs were about to change the fate of 2 civilizations forever. The EU's Horizon dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kelia system. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, staring at the view screen in amazement. The star ahead of them was perfect, burning with a steady golden light that bathed everything in warm radiance. 3 planets orbited the star, and the middle one was clearly the source of the signals they had been following. "My God," whispered Dr. Lisa Rodriguez from her science station. "Look at those readings. The planet is absolutely perfect for life. Comfortable temperature, breathable atmosphere, stable weather patterns. It's like someone designed it specifically for living beings." Morrison nodded, but his attention was focused on something else. Even from this distance, they could see that the planet was not natural. Geometric patterns covered its surface, too regular to be anything but artificial. Someone had built cities down there, and they were huge. "Rick, are you still picking up those transmissions?" Morrison asked his communications officer. "Yes, sir," Rick Santos replied, his voice filled with excitement. "They're much stronger now. Captain, I think they know we're here. The signal pattern just changed. It's like they're trying to respond to us." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. After all these years of wondering if humanity was alone in the universe, they were about to get their answer. "Take us in slowly. Full sensors. I want to know everything about this place before we get too close." As the Horizon moved deeper into the system, the crew worked to understand what they were seeing. The planet below them was covered in crystal structures that caught and reflected the sunlight. The cities were beautiful beyond anything humans had ever built, with towers that seemed to grow from the ground like enormous flowers. "I'm detecting about 12 billion life forms on the surface," Rodriguez reported. "They're definitely intelligent. Cities are incredibly advanced, but I'm not seeing any military installations or weapons." Chief Engineer Tony Walsh looked up from his console with a puzzled expression. "That's strange. No weapons at all? How do they defend themselves?" "Maybe they don't need to," suggested Dr. Amy Chen, the ship's linguist. "Maybe they've never had to fight anyone," Morrison considered. This possibility. On Earth, every civilization had developed weapons and armies out of necessity. The idea of a species that had never known war was almost impossible to imagine. But the evidence was right in front of them. "Open a channel," Morrison ordered. "Let's see if we can talk to them." Santos worked at his station for several minutes, trying to establish communication. Finally, he looked up with a smile. "Captain, they're using mathematics to communicate, Dr. Chen. You might want to take a look at this." Chen moved to the communications console and studied the incoming signals. Her eyes widened as she began to understand the patterns. "They're using prime numbers and geometric sequences. It's elegant, actually. They're trying to show us they're intelligent. Without using language, we might not understand." Over the next few hours, the crew of the Horizon worked to establish basic communication with the aliens below. It was slow work, using mathematics and simple pictures to convey meaning. But gradually, they began to understand each other. Aliens called themselves Colorians, and their planet was named Helios Prime. They were peaceful beings who had spent centuries trying to contact other intelligent species. They were overjoyed to finally receive an answer to their calls. "They want to meet us," Chen reported after several hours of communication. "They're inviting us to land in their capital city. They call it Harmony." Morrison looked around at his crew. This was the moment they had all dreamed of. First contact with an alien species. It was dangerous, but it was also the greatest opportunity in human history. "Prepare a shuttle," he ordered. "Small team only. Amy, Ben, you're with me. We're going to make history." The shuttle touched down in a crystal plaza in the center of Harmony. As the doors opened, Morrison stepped onto the surface of an alien world for the first time. The air was clean and sweet, filled with the sound of the crystal towers humming in the wind. A group of Colorians was waiting for them. Morrison's first sight of the aliens took his breath away. They were beautiful creatures, tall and graceful, made of what looked like living crystal. Their bodies caught the light and threw it back in rainbow patterns that danced across the plaza. The largest of the Colorians stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice created musical tones that echoed off the crystal buildings around them. Dr. Chen's translation device converted his words into English. "Welcome, friends from the stars. I am Resonance Keeper, Thynel. We have waited so long for this moment." Morrison stepped forward and extended his hand in the traditional human greeting. Thynel looked at the gesture curiously, then reached out with one of his own crystalline appendages. The moment their hands touched, both beings felt a strange connection, as if their very different species were somehow meant to meet. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Horizon. We heard your signals and came to answer them. We're honored to meet you." Thynel's body shimmered with colors that Chen's computer translated as extreme happiness. "Earth, is that the name of your world? Please, you must tell us about your people. We have so many questions." Over the following days, the humans and Colorians began to learn about each other. The Colorians showed their visitors the wonders of their civilization. They had cities that grew from living crystal, art forms that existed as pure mathematics, and technology that worked in harmony with their planet rather than against it. The Colorians were fascinated by human music. One communications officer, Rick Santos, played some Earth folk songs for them. A young Colorian named Melodic Tender Ziffel was so moved that her crystal body began to glow with shifting colors. "Your music has such passion," she told Santos through the translation device. "Speaks of struggle and triumph, of pain and joy. Our songs are peaceful, but yours have power." Santos smiled. Music is one of the things that makes us human. We use it to express emotions that words can't capture. But while the cultural exchange was wonderful, Morrison couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. His ship's sensors were picking up strange readings from the outer edge of the system. Something large was approaching, and it wasn't friendly. Lieutenant Commander Helen Brooks, the Horizon's sensor operator, called Morrison aside during one of their visits to the Crystal City. "Captain, you need to see this," she said, showing him a datapad with sensor readings. "We're detecting massive energy signatures moving toward this system. Multiple ships, heavily armed. They'll be here in about 3 days." Morrison studied the data with growing alarm. The approaching fleet was enormous, far larger than anything Earth had ever built, and the energy signatures suggested weapons of incredible power. "Do the Calorians know about this?" he asked. "I don't think so. Their sensors aren't as advanced as ours for long-range detection." Morrison made a difficult decision. He had to tell Thynol about the approaching threat, even though it would destroy the peaceful mood of their first contact that evening. As the twin suns of Helios Prime set behind the Crystal Mountains, Morrison met with Thynol and the other Calorian leaders. Through Dr. Chen's translation, he explained what their sensors had detected. "A fleet of ships is coming here," Morrison said carefully. "They appear to be heavily armed. Do your people have any enemies? Anyone who might wish you harm?" Thynol's crystal body shifted to darker colors that the translation system identified as confusion and fear. "Enemies? We have no enemies. We have never fought with anyone. We do not even understand what that means." Morrison realized with growing horror that the Calorians had no concept of warfare. They had never developed weapons or military tactics because they had never needed them. They were completely helpless against whatever was coming. "These ships that approach," Morrison continued, "they may not be friendly like us. They may want to hurt you or take your world from you, but why would anyone want to hurt us?" asked Ziffel, her young voice filled with innocence that broke Morrison's heart. "We have done nothing wrong. We only wanted to make friends." Morrison looked at his small crew, then at the billions of peaceful beings living in the crystal cities around them. The approaching fleet would arrive in 3 days, and there was nothing the Calorians could do to stop them. But maybe, just maybe, there was something the humans could do. Thynol, Morrison said quietly, "I need to ask you something important. Do you trust us?" The old Calorian's crystal body shimmered with warm colors. "Of course we trust you. You answered our call for friendship. You are the friends we have waited for." Morrison nodded grimly, as the Calorians had waited 3 centuries for friends to answer their call. Now those friends were going to have to decide how far they were willing to go to protect the beings who had welcomed them with such trust and joy in 3 days. The Vex Dominion fleet would arrive at Helios Prime, and when they did, they would discover that the peaceful planet they had come to conquer was no longer undefended. A single human ship stood between them and their prey, and that might just be enough to change everything. The Vex Dominion fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Helios system like a plague of metal locusts. 300 warships spread across space in perfect battle formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapons designed to crack planets and burn worlds. At the center of the fleet, massive dreadnought Bone Render cast a shadow that seemed to swallow the light of distant stars. On the bridge of the Bone Render, War Master Corvin studied the peaceful planet. Ahead of them, with cold satisfaction, his 6 arms moved across multiple control panels as he analyzed the sensor data. The world was even more valuable than he had hoped. Rich and rare crystals populated by billions of potential slaves and completely defenseless. "No orbital defenses," reported Subcommander Threx, his voice carrying the excitement of an easy victory. "No military installations on the surface. No weapon signatures at all. This will be the easiest conquest in Dominion history." Corvin's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among his species. "Send the surrender demand. Standard. Terms: they have 1 hour to submit, or we begin bombardment." But as the Vex fleet moved deeper into the system, their sensors detected something unexpected. A single small ship hung in orbit around the crystal planet. It was primitive by Vex standards, barely worthy of notice. But it was definitely armed, and it was moving to intercept them. On the bridge of the UES horizon, Captain Jake Morrison watched the approaching enemy fleet with grim determination. The odds were impossible. 300 Vex warships against one human exploration vessel. Any sane person would have already started running. Morrison had never claimed to be entirely sane. "Tony, what's our weapon status?" he asked his chief. "Engineer?" Tony Walsh looked up from his console, sweat beading on his forehead. "We've got our standard defensive systems. Plasma cannons, torpedo tubes, point defense lasers. Nothing that's going to make a dent in a fleet that size." "What about our mining equipment? The rock breakers and/or extractors?" Walsh's eyes lit up with understanding. "Just give me 6 hours and I can turn those into some very nasty weapons. They won't be pretty, but they'll pack a punch." "You've got 3 hours," Morrison said. "Get started." Dr. Lisa Rodriguez was frantically analyzing the Vex ships through their long-range sensors. "Captain, these vessels are armed with planet crackers. Weapons designed to shatter entire worlds. If they decide to bombard Helios Prime, there won't be anything left but asteroids." Morrison felt a cold weight settle in his stomach, but his voice remained steady. "Then we don't let them get that chance. Helen, start calculating firing solutions. Rick, send a message to the Calorians. Tell them to get as many people as possible into the deepest crystal caves they can find." Security Chief Gary Thompson was already organizing the crew into combat teams. "Sir, with respect, we're talking about a suicide mission here. That fleet could vaporize us without even slowing down." Morrison looked around at his crew. These people had signed up for exploration, not warfare. He had no right to ask them to die for aliens they had known for only 3 days. But when he opened his mouth to give them a choice, Dr. Amy Chen spoke first. "Captain, the Calorians have been broadcasting peaceful messages for 3 centuries. They've never hurt anyone. They don't even understand what war means." Her voice was quiet but firm. "If we don't stand up for them, who will?" One by one, the other crew members nodded their agreement. Engineer Dan Foster cracked his knuckles and said, "Well, if we're going to go out, let's make it count." Mechanic Julie Clark was already suiting up for damage control duty. "Those crystal cities are the most beautiful things I've ever seen. I'm not going to let some alien bullies destroy them without a fight." Medical Officer Karen Phillips was setting up emergency treatment stations throughout the ship. "We knew this job was dangerous when we signed up. Today, we find out what we're really made of." Down on Helios Prime, the Calorians were struggling to understand what was happening. Resonance Keeper Thynel had called an emergency gathering of all the city leaders, but the concept of war was so foreign to them that they could barely grasp the situation. "The humans say that bad people are coming to hurt us," young Ziffel said, her crystal body flickering with confused colors. "But why would anyone want to hurt us? What did we do wrong?" "We did nothing wrong," Theno replied, though his own body was showing the dark colors of deep worry. "Captain Morrison says that some beings in the universe take things from others by force. It is a concept our people have never needed to understand." The Calorians began moving into the deep crystal caves as the humans had suggested, but they moved slowly and without real understanding of the danger they faced. To them, this was all just a strange misunderstanding that would surely be resolved peacefully, back in space. The first exchange of messages was taking place between the human ship and the Vex fleet. War Master Corvin's surrender demand was simple and brutal: submit immediately or be destroyed. "Captain," Morrison's response was equally direct, "this world is under the protection of the Terran Alliance. Withdraw your fleet or face the consequences." Corvin laughed when he heard the translation. One tiny ship challenging his entire fleet. The humans were either insane or incredibly brave. Either way, they would be dead soon. "Destroy that ship," he ordered. "Then begin bombardment of the planet." The first Vex attack came from a squadron of fast cruisers. They moved in perfect formation, their weapons charging with deadly energy. But as they closed the distance to the horizon, something unexpected happened. The human ship didn't run. Instead, it accelerated straight toward them. Chief Engineer Walsh had worked miracles with the mining equipment. Nuclear-powered rock breakers had been converted into improvised torpedoes, or processing lasers had been boosted far beyond safe parameters. The ship's small cargo bay had been turned into a missile factory with every spare piece of metal being turned into projectiles. The horizon hit the Vex squadron like a bolt of lightning. Morrison had ordered a full ramming attack, using the ship's mass as a weapon. The first Vex cruiser exploded as the horizon's reinforced hull tore through its bridge. The second ship was crippled by a spread of mining torpedoes that punched through its armor like paper, but the victory came at a cost. The horizon was badly damaged, with hull breaches on 3 decks and main power fluctuating wildly. Worse, the Vex fleet was barely scratched. They had lost 2 ships out of 300. Damage report Morrison called out as the bridge shook. From another impact, hull integrity at 60%, reported Lieutenant Commander Helen Brooks. We've lost 2 plasma cannons, and our main sensor array is damaged. But we're still flying. The Vex fleet was regrouping, clearly shocked by the ferocity of the human attack. War Master Corvin studied the battle data with growing respect and anger. These humans fought like creatures possessed, showing no fear of death. What manner of beings are these? Subcommander Threx asked, his voice uncertain for the first time. Corvin's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Dangerous ones, but still only 1 ship. Order the fleet to surround them. We will finish this quickly. But as the Vex ships moved to encircle the damaged human vessel, Captain Morrison was far from finished. He opened a channel to address his crew, his voice carrying clearly through every section of the ship. All hands, this is the captain. I know the odds look bad, but remember what we're fighting for. Down on that planet are 12 billion peaceful beings who have never known violence. They trusted us to protect them, and that's exactly what we're going to do. He paused, looking around at his bridge crew. These people had followed him across the galaxy, and now they were following him into what looked like certain death. He had never been prouder of anyone in his life. The Vex think they can take this world because the Calorians can't fight back, but they made one mistake. They didn't count on us, and humans don't abandon their friends. The crew responded with fierce determination. Engineer Walsh pushed the ship's damaged systems beyond all safe limits. Gunners like Sergeant Pete Davis and Corporal Nina Johnson prepared for boarding actions that everyone knew were probably suicide missions. Communications Officer Rick Santos sent one last message to Earth, reporting their situation and requesting immediate assistance. As the Vex fleet closed in for the kill, the UES horizon prepared for a battle that would determine the fate of 2 civilizations. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting a nearly hopeless battle. But they had something the Vex didn't understand. They had something worth dying for. The real fight was about to begin. Admiral Sandra Hayes received Captain Morrison's emergency transmission while she was reviewing fleet reports in her office at Mars Station. Message was brief but clear. First contact with an alien species had been made. They were peaceful, and they were about to be destroyed by a hostile alien fleet. Morrison was requesting immediate military assistance, even though he knew help could never arrive in time. Hayes stared at the message for exactly 30 seconds. Then she activated the fleet-wide emergency channel. This is Admiral Hayes to all ships in the solar defense grid. We have a Code 1 situation. Prepare for immediate deployment to the Andromeda sector. Authorization, Omega 77. Her aide looked up in shock. Admiral, a Code 1 deployment requires approval from Earth Command. The bureaucracy alone could take weeks. Was already putting on her uniform jacket. Captain Morrison and his crew are fighting alone against impossible odds to protect an entire alien civilization. We'll deal with the bureaucracy later. Right now, we're going to war. Within 6 hours, the largest military fleet in human history was racing toward Helios Prime. 60 warships under the command of Captain Ryan Mitchell led the charge, while transport ships carried ground forces commanded by Colonel Steve Adams. Support vessels loaded with everything from medical supplies to construction equipment followed behind them. The response was entirely voluntary. No one had ordered these men and women to risk their lives for aliens they had never met. But when word spread through the fleet about what was happening at Helios Prime, Volunteers lined up faster than they could be processed. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, spent the journey studying every piece of data about the Calorians that Morrison had transmitted. She was fascinated by their crystalline biology and their ability to create technology that worked in harmony with their planet. These beings represent everything we hope to find in space, she told Colonel Adams during one of their planning meetings. A peaceful, advanced civilization that has never known war. If we can't protect them, what does that say about us as a species? Adams nodded grimly. He was a veteran of the Martian border wars and had seen enough combat to know that. Sometimes violence was the only answer to violence. My Marines are ready, Doctor. We'll give those crystal people a chance to keep their peaceful world. Back at Helios Prime, the battle was going badly for the humans. The UES Horizon had managed to destroy 8 Vex ships through ramming attacks and improvised weapons, but the damage to their own vessel was severe. Captain Morrison had been forced to evacuate 3 decks, and their weapons were nearly exhausted. Hull integrity down to 30%, reported Lieutenant Commander Helen Brooks, her voice strained. We can't take much more of this. Morrison wiped blood from a cut on his forehead and looked around his damaged bridge. Half his crew was injured, and those who could still fight were running on pure determination. But they weren't giving up. Tony, how are those mining charges coming along? Chief Engineer Walsh's voice came through the intercom from deep in the ship's belly. I've got 12 more ready to go, Captain, but after that we're down to throwing wrenches at them. The Vex fleet had learned to respect the human ship's desperate tactics. War Master Corvin had lost more vessels to the tiny human ship than he had in his last 3 major conquests combined. The humans fought with a ferocity that defied all logic, sacrificing themselves to protect beings they barely knew. These humans are insane, Subcommander Threx observed, watching another ramming attack that destroyed both a Vex destroyer and badly damaged the human ship. They fight like cornered animals. Corvin studied the tactical display with growing unease. His fleet was still overwhelmingly superior, but the humans had shown capabilities that his intelligence had never prepared him for. They turned mining equipment into weapons, used their own ship as a missile, and seemed to have no concept of surrender. What kind of world creates beings like this? He wondered aloud. The answer to that question was racing toward them at faster than light speed. Earth was indeed a dangerous world, a planet where only the strongest and most adaptable life forms survived. Humans had evolved in an environment that constantly tried to kill them. And they had learned to fight back against impossible odds. Down on Helios Prime, the Calorians were beginning to understand what war meant. They watched in horror and amazement. As the human ship continued to fight against the massive enemy fleet, the concept of beings willingly dying to protect others was completely foreign to their peaceful culture. Why do they do this? Asked melodic Tender Ziffel, her crystal body flickering with colors that had no names in Calorian language. Why do they risk their lives for us? Resonance Keeper Thino had been studying the humans closely since the battle began. He was beginning to see patterns in their behavior that revealed something profound about their nature. I think, he said slowly, that these humans cannot bear to see others suffer when they have the power to help. They would rather die fighting than live knowing they could have made a difference. As if to prove his point, the UES Horizon executed another desperate attack. This time, Captain Morrison had ordered all remaining crew to the escape pods, while he and a skeleton crew made one final ramming run at the Vex flagship. The Horizon, her hull cracked and burning, accelerated directly toward the Bone Render. Corvin watched in disbelief as the human ship prepared to sacrifice itself in a hopeless attempt to damage his dreadnought. But at the last moment, long-range sensors detected something that changed everything. New contacts were appearing at the edge of the system. Lots of them. Fleet contacts, shouted the Vex sensor operator. 60 ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel, their human designs. The Earth Defense Fleet had arrived. Captain Ryan Mitchell's flagship. The EU's Defiance led the charge into the Helios system. Behind him came destroyers, cruisers, and battleships that represented the finest military technology humanity had ever created. These were not exploration vessels converted for battle. These were warships built specifically to fight and win against any threat. This is Captain Mitchell of the Earth Defense Fleet. To Captain Morrison. Hold your position. Cavalry has arrived. Morrison slumped in his command chair, hardly daring to believe what he was seeing on his sensors. His ship was minutes away from complete destruction. But suddenly the odds had changed dramatically. The human fleet spread out in perfect battle formation. These crews had trained for years in the asteroid belts of the outer solar system, fighting mock battles against impossible odds. They knew how to work together, how to support each other, how to make every shot count. War Master Corvin found himself facing a completely different situation. His fleet still outnumbered the humans 5-1, but these new arrivals were clearly military vessels with experienced crews. The easy conquest he had planned was about to become a real war. Order all ships to battle stations, he commanded. Prepare for fleet engagement. But as the two fleets maneuvered for position, Dr. Alina Vasquez was making a discovery that would change everything. Working with Calorian scientists who had been monitoring the battle, she found that the crystal beings could actually interface with human technology through harmonic resonance. Captain Mitchell, she reported over the fleet communication channel. The Calorians can enhance our sensors and weapon systems. Their crystalline bodies can create resonance fields that boost our technology beyond normal parameters. Young Ziffel was the first to volunteer. Despite her fear, she allowed herself to be connected to the UES Defiance's targeting computer. The moment the connection was made, the ship's accuracy increased by 300%. Other Calorians quickly followed her example. Across the human fleet, crystal beings linked their consciousness with human technology, creating a hybrid fighting force that neither species could have achieved alone. The real battle was about to begin. And for the first time since the Vex fleet had arrived, the outcome was no longer certain. The Calorians had waited 3 centuries for friends to answer their call for help. They had found something even better. They had found guardians. The final battle for Kelia's Prime began as the twin suns reached their highest point in the crystal sky. War Master Corvin had decided that if he could not have an easy conquest, he would settle for complete destruction. His fleet moved into bombardment formation, preparing to crack the planet's surface and destroy the crystal cities forever. But the combined human-Calorian defense was ready for him. Captain Ryan Mitchell coordinated the fleet's attack from his flagship, while young, melodic Tender Ziffel remained connected to his targeting systems. Her crystalline consciousness merged with the ship's computers, creating accuracy levels that seemed impossible. Every shot from the human fleet found its target with mathematical precision. Target their command ship, Mitchell ordered. If we can take out Corvin, the rest of the fleet might retreat. The used Defiance, enhanced by Calorian resonance technology, fired a concentrated barrage at the Bone Render. The massive Vex Dreadnought's shields flared and buckled under the assault, but held. Corvin's ship was too well protected to be destroyed. Easily, Corvin retaliated by ordering his entire fleet to focus fire on the human flagship. Hundreds of energy beams converged on the Defiance, but something unexpected happened. The ship's shields, boosted by Calorian harmonic fields, absorbed the energy and redirected it back at the attacking vessels. Impossible, breathed Sub-Commander Threx as he watched 3 Vex cruisers destroyed by their own reflected weapons fire. How are they doing this? War Master Corvin was beginning to understand that he had underestimated both species. The humans were fierce warriors, but the Calorians were far from helpless. Together, they had created something entirely new. Down on the planet's surface, another battle was beginning. Corvin had sent landing forces to capture Calorian cities and use the population as hostages. 100,000 Vex warriors descended toward the crystal valleys in heavily armed dropships. Colonel Steve Adams was waiting for them with 10,000 human marines and something the Vex had never encountered before: Calorian warriors. The crystal beings had never fought a war, but they were fast learners. Guided by human military advisors like Sergeant Major Joe Collins, they discovered they could use their harmonic abilities as weapons. Their voices, working in perfect harmony, could shatter Vex armor and disrupt their technology. The first Vex assault wave landed in the Valley of Singing Crystals, expecting to face defenseless civilians. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by a coordinated defense force that used tactics they could not understand. Harmonic Guardian Vesh, young Calorian who had volunteered to fight, stood alongside Marine Captain Chris Reed as the enemy. Forces advanced. Together, they represented something new in the galaxy, two different species working as one to protect what they both valued. Remember, Reed told his mixed force of humans and Calorians, we're not just fighting for this planet. We're fighting for the idea that peaceful beings have the right to exist without fear. The battle in the valley was unlike anything the universe had ever seen. Human weapons and Calorian harmonics combined to create devastating effects. When the crystal beings sang in unison, their voices could crack stone and shatter metal. When humans provided covering fire with their advanced weapons, the Calorians could focus their harmonic attacks with deadly precision. The Vex found themselves fighting an enemy that broke every rule of warfare they knew. Human soldiers would charge directly into enemy fire to protect Calorian civilians, while the crystal beings would risk their lives to enhance human weapon systems. Neither species would abandon the other, no matter how desperate the situation. Became high above the planet, the space battle was reaching its climax. Captain Morrison, his ship barely holding together, made one final, desperate decision. The UES Horizon was too damaged to continue fighting, but it still had one last weapon. It's faster-than-light drive. All hands abandon ship, Morrison ordered. Over the intercom, set the drive to overload. We're going to ram the bone render and take it with us. But Resonance Keeper Thynel, who had been monitoring the battle from the planet's surface, had a different idea. The ancient Calorian opened a communication channel to both Morrison and Mitchell. Captain Morrison, do not sacrifice your ship yet. I believe there is another way. The crystal matrix that forms our planet's core can be used as a massive harmonic amplifier. If we combine your ship's power source with our planetary resonance system, we can create a pulse that will disable their entire fleet. Morrison understood immediately, but he also understood the cost. Thanal, that kind of energy. Discharge would probably destroy both our ships and damage your planet. You're talking about risking everything. My people have lived in peace for thousands of years because others were willing to fight for us today, Thynel replied. It is time we took that risk ourselves. It's working together. Human engineers and Calorian technicians began the most dangerous experiment in either species' history. The damaged U.S. Horizon was guided into position above the planet's largest crystal formation, while Thynel and his fellow Resonance Keepers prepared to channel the planet's harmonic energy. War Master Corvin watched these preparations with growing alarm. His sensors could detect massive energy buildups, both in space and on the planet's surface. Whatever the humans and Calorians were planning, it was beyond anything in Vex tactical databases. All ships, prepare to retreat, he ordered.
For the
First time in his military career, Corvin was afraid, but it was too late. Captain Morrison and Resonance Keeper Thynel activated their combined system at exactly the same moment. The UES Horizon's fusion reactor fed power into Kelios Prime's crystal matrix, while Thynel and thousands of other Calorians added their harmonic voices to the planet's natural resonance. The result was the most beautiful and terrible thing the galaxy had ever witnessed. A wave of pure harmonic energy erupted from the planet's surface, washing over the Vex fleet like a tsunami of light and sound. Ship after ship went dark, as their systems were overwhelmed by frequencies their technology could not handle. The bone render, the mighty dreadnought that had conquered dozens of worlds, drifted powerless in space. Its weapons were silent, its engines dead. Its crew stunned by the harmonic pulse that had shut down their entire ship. But the victory came at a price. The UES Horizon was destroyed in the energy discharge, and Captain Morrison was lost with his ship. Thynel survived. But the effort had drained him so completely that his crystal body had lost much of its natural glow. On the planet's surface, the Vex ground forces found themselves cut off from their fleet and surrounded by an enemy that showed them mercy they had never shown others. Colonel Adams offered them a choice: surrender and be returned to their own space, or continue fighting and face the combined might of two species that had learned to work as one. Most of the Vex chose surrender. 6 months later, Helios Prime had become the center of the galaxy's newest alliance. The Terran-Calorian Partnership established its headquarters in the rebuilt city of Harmony, where humans and crystal beings worked together to explore the galaxy and protect other peaceful species. Ambassador Linda Wright, representing Earth's government, signed the formal alliance treaty with Resonance Keeper Thynol in a ceremony that was broadcast across both civilizations. The document established principles that would guide both species for generations to come. The strong have a duty to protect the weak. Friendship is worth any sacrifice, and peace is only possible when good people are willing to fight for it, Captain. Morrison was posthumously awarded both the Earth Medal of Honor and the Calorian Crystal of Eternal Harmony. A new class of exploration vessels was named in his honor, now ships that carried both human crews and Calorian partners to the far reaches of space. The first of these ships, the Use Harmony, was commanded by Captain Ryan Mitchell, with young Ziffel serving as his Calorian partner. Together, they patrolled the galaxy, ready to answer any calls for help that might come from peaceful species in danger. The Calorians had waited 3 centuries for friends to answer their call. They had found something better than friends. They had found family. Together, they made sure that no peaceful world would ever face destruction alone again. In the end, the galaxy learned a truth that would echo through the ages. When innocent beings call for help, sometimes the universe sends them exactly what they need. Sometimes it sends them guardians who understand that true strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the willingness to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The crystal cities of Helios Prime sang their ancient songs of peace, but now those songs carried a new melody, the sound of friendship forged in fire, of alliance born from sacrifice, and of hope that would never again face the darkness alone.